The following video contains sensitive content and depictions of depression, gore, and suicide. There will also be spoilers, so if you haven't already played the game, then alright then. If on a Winter's Night for Travelers is a game made by Dead Idle Games. That title is quite the mouthful, so I will be referring to this game as Winter's Night from now on. It is a story-driven, point-and-click adventure that features the neat little pixel art aesthetic I have come to know and love as of late. Winter's Night is set within the time period of the 1920s. America is getting its first real shot at consumerism, and was the country's kicking off to becoming one of the wealthiest countries in the world. Alongside that, jazz was in full bloom as a musical genre, and the prohibition of alcohol was made to help reel in the overindulgence of that luxury. Unfortunately, this point in time also housed one of the more bleaker stories of racism that spawned from biased immigration of specific ethnical backgrounds and the mass migration of African citizens. This is important to keep in mind for later on in the game. The game starts us off by attending a masquerade ball aboard a train. Here, we see two figures, one wearing a skull mask named Lila, and another wearing what looks like a dog mask named Carlo. After a bit of chit-chat, Carlo says he has no memory of how he boarded the train and explains the situation from before he was invited to the ball. From here, we view the first of 4 songs to be sung throughout the game. We find ourselves in Rome, where Carlo is on vacation, looking to meet up with Patrick, his secret innamorato. Here we get to test out the fancy point-and-click style of this adventure, and take note of a delicious painting before meeting the man of the hour. For all intents and purposes, it seems like this was a meetup for some unsavory fornication. It turns sour, however, when Patrick gets cold feet and tells Carlo that he doesn't want to further taint his already sketchy relationship with his wife and kids. Carlo is a man who does not take too well to getting his feelers crushed like that and proceeds to fucking pop Patrick, which caused him to crash into the glass bottles of alcohol and die. Oh my god! Oh my god! What? That's incredible! Holy crap, dude. Why'd you have to punch him that hard? Well, that went to shit real quick. Love do be like that sometimes. It isn't surprising when Carlo starts getting all loopy for murdering his illicit partner. As everything begins to get warped around, we find a mysterious invitation to a masquerade party aboard a train, and soon after bear witness to the grisly outcome. However, if Carlo died, how could he be attending this party? A question that will have to be answered later, as our third guest in our little gathering makes her presence on the train. The lady in the cat mask, Valerie Winterbourne, has a similar predicament as Carlo because she doesn't remember how she boarded the train. However, she also seems to have misplaced her husband. She sits down and explains the second tale to be told on this winter train. In contrast to the first story, we enter an eerie, rainy bedroom in Britain where we see Valerie wake up from slumber. Very quickly, we come to understand that Valerie has taken a trip to the loony bin from her response to actions and her uncontrolled addiction to laudanum, a seductive drug that is supposed to help her sleep, but also wraps her mind in delusions of better days. In this story, we do a whole lot of wandering around, but the important thing to notice is that there are 2 worlds happening as the story progresses. The world of reality, where a house has been all but abandoned for a long period of time, and as she stumbles around, the place only becomes more deteriorated. And the world of her delusion, where everything is bright and properly kept, and contains her husband, maid, and cat. This is the world we view most of the story. Honestly, it's hard to put into words the changes that happen throughout the story, so I'm gonna get to the brass tacks. Firstly, Valerie has had a bad addiction to laudanum, so bad that when she runs out, she blames it on her housekeeper and husband from hiding it from her, even though she's the only one in the house. Secondly, Valerie is a collector of senseless expensive junk, avid enjoyer of music, and travels a lot. Thirdly, her family is rich out of their minds, and as such, Valerie receives letters from men who want to marry her for obvious reasons. Fourthly, her husband Henry Winterbourne was a commoner who was married into Valerie's wealth, which was supposedly frowned upon as dictated in the newspaper. Lastly, there was an event that killed her husband some time ago. That last point is confusing, but let me try to put together this deluded mess, though I probably got it wrong. Valerie was married to Henry, and though Valerie says it was for love, Henry's action made it seem otherwise. Henry died after an accident. Valerie was having nightmares and given laudanum by her maid, who was taking care of her at the house. Her mind only became more mushy as time went on, and as she became more addicted to the laudanum. Valerie received letters from men who would go as far as marry a crazy person just to be rich. Valerie also had an outburst when trying to get more laudanum and the maid quit. All alone, she slowly faded away and died due to suicide because she couldn't take care of herself and the state of her mind. So what happened that caused Henry to pass away? Turns out that on a rainy night, Valerie's cat got out and Henry almost hit him with his car. Henry swerved out of the way and crashed. Asshole cat. And here's where we see why Valerie had nightmares. After Henry died, Valerie went manic and slaughtered her cat. Seriously, she watered her plants with his blood for Christ's sake. She hid his body in her garden, and as we play, we get to put together the scene of what happened. We also find a key to her husband's study, where, upon entering, we see that Henry is not, in fact, there. Remember, this whole time we've been playing, we thought her husband was still alive, so seeing it empty helped put together the grand story she was trying to tell. After this revelation, Valerie really starts to fade away as she stumbles around the house. Entering the main room, we see an invitation to the masquerade party. Well, that's nice. Too bad we see her grisly end thanks to the glass that had shattered while finding the hidden laudanum. Back on the train, the trio sit with solemn feelings as our fourth and final fractured figure finds the Foolers. I really don't know why I write things like this. A man who had been listening to the story, wearing a demon mask named Jordan Samuels, makes his presence known. He, like the others, has no recollection of how he boarded the train. He also notes how the weather outside is awful, yet he has no coat. Seems like he has the inclination that he, like the other three, do not belong there. Of course, it is here we visit the third and longest chronicle to be created. The story starts in New York, where Jordan is an assistant to a doctor who is giving lectures to a class. Someone in the audience makes a racist joke, and everyone, including the doctor, laughs. Ah, the 1920s. I wonder what people would think if they could see 100 years in the future. Not much else happens, and we find ourselves in Jordan's run-down cheap apartment. I should note that the people in the audience also accuse Jordan of stealing medical supplies. This ends up being the truth, but not because Jordan was trying to sell them from cash. No, see, he was trying to do a ritual to summon a demon to give him power, of course. You silly goofs. It is okay, though, because Jordan ends up helping a man in his apartment by giving him some of the stolen medicine to alleviate his pain. Anyway, after some puzzle solving, Jordan performs a ritual in front of a mirror and proceeds to use an athame to maim his body to complete the ritual. Upon doing this, the mirror turns black and Jordan takes a step inside and exits to a kind of limbo where a strange creature called the Guardian adorns the wall. The creature cryptically forewarns us what to expect by continuing down the path. It is only quite literally by tearing the fire from the creature that we are able to continue our dark descent. The fire symbolizes will and determination here. Next, we come across this turtle thing in a swampy library of sorts. Jordan must find books on the bookshelves that chronicle his life and feed them to the turtle. Here we learn more about Jordan. Most importantly, he was married, then left his wife to fight in a war. He had aspirations to play music, but became a doctor, and lastly, he abandoned his post as a medic in the war and ran away. After fleeing the war, he ended up as the assistant in New York. Feeding the books to the turtle symbolized him losing his memories, his mind, in his pursuit of power. After feeding every book to the turtle, Jordan is swallowed into the swamp and wakes up in the battlefield of the war he took part in. There are 3 soldiers who are critically wounded, one with both of his legs blown off that is holding a gun. There is also a reverend who explains that Jordan's life is with sin, and this is his chance to rectify his wrongs. Here, we go around and try to give the soldiers peace by killing them. Sheesh. Now we know why he ran away. While I would say it is awesome to see a guy with no legs splatter his brain juice all over a wall, I'm not a psychopath, so let's just say it is gruesome. I think this part symbolizes Jordan giving up his soul by doing the one thing he could not. Whatever, I think I'm reading too much into this, but after talking to the Reverend again, we find ourselves in the auditorium where the doctor from earlier is giving his lecture. Only this time Jordan is sitting in a chair where, as the audience chants in the background, he slowly exposes and flays open his body for all to see. Just when you think it couldn't get worse, it does. With all of his insides on his outsides, I think this symbolizes Jordan giving up his body in his pursuit for power. After losing everything that he is, Jordan stumbles around and eventually finds himself back at the apartment from before he steps into the mirror. This time, however, we see a figure of what looks to be Jordan wearing the same demon mask he was when he was on the train. Demon Mask then kills Jordan, collects an invitation to the masquerade ball, and then pieces out to the mirror. I'm sure there's some meaning to all this, but I'll let you fine folks figure that one out. Anyway, back aboard the train where the quartet makes remarks on the story. Layla, the one in the skull mask, is called to the other car, and it is here where we learn of the fourth and final recital to be read. A man with a flaming head questions Layla for chatting with, well, people. Layla describes how their stories are sad, and that she felt sorry that all of them ended up dying by their own hands. This sets Flame Man to rage, and it is here that we figure out that the fourth story has been told to us since the beginning, the train. It is a train that traverses souls to the afterlife, and Layla invited humans, who are meant to be transported to below, to join her so that she can hear their stories. Flame Man and Layla mention how these people are all still going below, but now have a little better chance at redemption since they had this cheat masquerade party. The game then ends there, with Layla holding the arm of Flame Man. Alright, personal opinion time. I had heard about this game while watching a video on best games for the Halloween season, and since I have been enjoying these pixel aesthetic story games, I figured I would give it a shot. These collections of small stories were fun and cozy to sit down one night and just play. The pacing was also nice, with Carlo's story being the shortest and slowly getting longer from there. It was a natural lean into the more story-rich parts of the game. However, I do need to mention the weakest part of the game for me, and that is the puzzles. There aren't many puzzles in the game, but, and this is my own opinion, they were frustrating and so unnecessary. Having hard puzzles is fine, even good sometimes, in a game, but the way this game was played, and this is just me, was just a constant build and flow to the progress of the story, but then there would be a screeching halt just to complete a puzzle and continue the story. This is bad for many reasons. Firstly, when you make the solution super vague and give the player no clues on what to do, well, that's just bad game design for this instance. Secondly, in a pixel art styled game like this, you cannot make certain items that you need to interact with blend into the background. What I mean is that there are a couple of instances where the only way to progress, you need to click a tiny, like 4x4 pixel spot that you can barely see and makes no sense to click on. Do you see where my frustrations come from? This is meant to be a short game, completable in about an hour and a half. However, it took an hour longer for me just because I'm running around the game with my head cut off, or I'm forced to analyze the screen for a tiny pixel that might be off that I have to click on. However, with that said, I still enjoyed this game, and the stories for what they were. I would have liked the game to be much, much longer, with maybe puzzles that resemble something like a Nancy Drew or Resident Evil game, as well as some interactable characters with choice dialogue would have been nice. I think that the point of the game was just for the developers to be like, here, this is what we are all about, which is fine. Oh, and I should mention that this game is free, which helps make the game more enjoyable, as weird as that might sound. And that's it. Happy Halloween, guys.